the late legendary director and playwright Gibson Kente will be honoured at the Soweto Theatre from the 26th of February. The Red Theatre will take on the name Gibson Kente Theatre. Now, the prolific playwright trained many of the well-known actors that we see on stage and television. He was dubbed the father of black theatre. And to discuss this further, we're joined by Joburg Theatre's artistic director, James Ngcobo, who's here in the studio with us. James, thank you so much for your time this evening. Thank you for your patience. I'm sure you understand when we're dealing with these tumultuous times in the artistic world, and maybe let's start there. You know, art is art, whether it's music, whether it's hip-hop, whether it's in a theatre, whether it's show tunes that Gibson Kente was known for. We're living in tumultuous times, aren't we?
Yeah, you know, I was just thinking the other day, the one time I got to direct eNCA was in 2012, and we did a huge project in Bloemfontein, and it was the centenary of the ANC, and I was asked to
remember that time. Okay.
Yes. And
Tell us about that. What was the experience like? What do you remember of that time?
It was just, I mean, there's a building just off Jan Smart's, a company called Blue Moon, where we were doing the rehearsals, and I remember him arriving at rehearsals, and he was then commissioned to write a hip-hop song that was very specific to the 40s.
And he got a lot of flack for that at the time. So I wonder what you were expecting on his arrival, and then what the experience was like once you got to know him, even though it was in a professional sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the generosity that he brought onto the project was, for me, absolutely amazing. And I had written the script, and I needed to work with artists who would then come and bring their voices. You know, I'm such a huge collaborator, and that's what I got from him, just a complete obsession with an idea of telling stories. And he used his voice and a specific genre, which for him was hip-hop. But you could tell that as a librettist, he was very clever, and a sense that he was socially conscious, a sense that he was well-read, which are beautiful boxes for any artist to tick beautifully, you know. And it's a moment that I will always hold dear, because I mean that production had almost a cast of 100, and each person came into this work. We're celebrating 100 years. But what was quite fascinating was taking artists that are in the contemporary tapestry and use their voices to rewind the tape and go back in time. And he wrote that piece with such ease. And the moments we sat at Blue Moon, finding the story and finding how he gets in and then spew his words onto this 100-year story. It was just like, my heart was smiling, because, as I say, that when you collaborate with artists, you write something, and then you're not precious about it. Then you cast people that will take the work and embellish the work too.
But you don't know until that moment which way it's going to go. I mean, I suppose from an artistic point of view, art is often made by people who in that moment are seen as disruptors. AKA, especially hip-hop artists, the new generation, old generation, would have be seen as disruptors at various times, depending on where they find themselves socially. And that then allows us to speak about somebody like Gibson Kente, who too, at the time, would have been seen as a disruptor, the father of black theatre, who was making theatre at a time where everything was being done by the regime at the time to make it impossible for him to do so. Talk to me about the impact that Gibson Kente of that time has had on the industry that we're still feeling today.
I still ask myself, and as we are preparing for the renaming of the Red Theatre to the Gibson Kente Theatre, and just think that he was making theatre at a time when there was a horrible law in this country that was called the law of influx control. How he was able to tour those productions around South Africa just is mind-blowing for me. And he will always have his place as somebody who really gave the visibility of black narrative. That's what Bakib did, and and for me, I call it what Pragib was all about was a commitment to society. At a time of such degradation that we were going through in this country, he was able to just pull biographies from life, write about them. And Pragib was also, he had an amazing gift that he wrote political stories, but also he wrote stories about normality. You know, just about a father who wakes up every morning and go to work, a loving father, a loving mother.
The intimacy of that everyday life, and with the backdrop of this evil regime.
Yeah, and all of I grew up in Durban, and being the 10th of 12 kids, I was young. I was not allowed to go and watch Gibson Kente, but every year my siblings. And people in the township where I was, Wamashu, people looked forward to the next production that Gibson Kente. And when you see today, I mean, I love what you were saying, talking about his impact. A lot of people that go and watch theatre today, they tell stories of being taken to a Gibson Kente production, either by a parent or by an older sister or an older brother. So he instilled a love for theatre that, you know, and expose people to story, which is stuff that we find in countries like the UK. When you go to the theatre in the UK, it's not a big thing. Everybody does. It's so interwoven with life. And that, for me, is the utopia that we dream about, that Pragib was the gateway to. And so for us now at Joburg City Theatres to attach his legacy on that beautiful building that is that is in the township of Soweto, it's going to make Pragib live forever. And so I've been spending time with artists. We've commissioned the most beautiful. When you walk into the theater, we have commissioned this gallery. You're going to see a thing that says the Gibson Kente Gallery, a space of his memory that has all the pieces that he has written. And I sat with these artists and worked out the palette of it, the feel of it. As people walk towards the Gibson Kente Theatre, they will see this spectacle on the wall, and we have a monitor that will loop his life throughout the day. And the most beautiful animation that is played in these clips, that the animation that are inspired by the titles of his plays. And I would love to believe that to this day in South Africa, you will struggle to find a TV series that doesn't have an actor that was
I was about to say, we spoke about how he planted the seed for theatre goers of the future, but a massive impact was also had in the enormous amount of theatre professionals that he mentored and planted the seed with as well.
Yes, the amount of directors that are out there who started out with Pragib, and all of them speak about how he kept saying, he spoke about honesty in storytelling, that stories should ooze something that is so in sync with the landscape where the stories come from, and left like really an indelible mark on these people. That for me, when I was a young actor, I was then being directed by these people who were mentored and trained by Gibson Kente. And then what also we've done as a theatre to go beyond just the naming, we are establishing what is going to be known as the Gibson Kente Annual Lecture, to have Gibson Kente colliding with the academic space. And we're not going to be myopic and say that lecture must only be done by people from the arts. It could be a paleontologist, it could be a pediatrician, anyone that has a commitment to society. We will be choosing these people every year, and we have a mission that every year in February we are going to concoct ideas of celebrating Pragib. So I am directing at the moment an orchestra that on the 26th, because
music was a big part of his work as well.
He was a genius. He was an absolute genius. Grew up at the Seventh-day Adventist Church and Salvation Army, and you know, this boykie from Eastern Cape who just had such a love for music. But the other day I saw these young people, 16, 17, 18, with their scores, and they're reading Pragib and they playing Pragib. I just wanted to walk outside and weep.
Absolutely.
Because then the continuum of his heart, his passion, he will then be taken to the next decade by young people. I mean, you go to Russia. In Russia, they speak about Chekhov, the greatest Russian, the Russian playwright. You know, and Germans gave the Bertolt Brecht to the world, and we are now celebrating Gibson Kente.
As we should.
Yes, and I love the influx of young people that are graduating from different universities coming to the theatre.
You're just working with goosebumps all day by the sounds of it. Gibson, we have run out of time, but most importantly, if people want to be part of the experience, obviously there's a launch event. How are we allowing the public to be a part of this honouring of Gibson Kente? And where can they find out information?
Yeah, well, I mean, on all our social media platforms we're there, but we are going to be announcing an installation of works that are going to be staged at the Gibson Kente Theatre, and so that will be coming out soon.
Goodness, I've got goosebumps just thinking about it. Ngcobo, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for coming in this evening and for sharing. And all the best. This is such important work that we lay down our history and that we ourselves are telling those stories is what he would have wanted, I'm sure, in the first place. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure if you go onto the Joburg Theatre's websites and social media platforms, so Soweto Theatre especially, you'll be able to find out more.